Hello, welcome back to a second helping of Chicken Soup for the Soul. This series of me reading different books as a way to reach out to people at the moment feeling isolated and missing loved ones. So they're just different heartwarming stories. I haven't fully read this story, I just glanced at the beginning bit of it and I think it looks like it's going to be interesting. It's called We're Retards. So, before I start, there's a very important question I've got to ask you. Are you sitting comfortably?
Yes.
What's that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
Then I'll begin.
Or maybe not on
Silence in the cheap seat, please. On my first day of teaching, all my classes were going well. Being a teacher is going to be a cinch, I decided. Then came period 7, the last class of the day. As I walked towards the room, I heard furniture crash. Round in the corner, I saw one boy pinning another to the floor. "Listen, you retard," yelled the one at the bottom. "I don't give a damn about your sister. You keep your hands off her, you hear me?" the boy on the top threatened. I drew up my short frame and asked them to stop fighting. Suddenly, 14 pairs of eyes were riveted on my face. I knew I did not look convincing. Glaring at each other and at me, the two boys slowly took their seats. At that moment, the teacher from across the hall stuck his head in the door and shouted at my students to sit down, shut up, and do what I said. I was left feeling powerless. I tried to teach the lesson I had prepared, but was met with a sea of guarded faces. As the class was leaving, I detained the boy who had instigated the fight. "I'll call him Mark." "Lady, don't waste your time," he told me. "We're retards." Then Mark strolled out of the room. Dumbstruck, I slumped into my chair and wondered if I should have become a teacher. Was the only cure for problems like this to get out? I told myself I'd suffer 1 year, and after my marriage, that next summer, I'd do something more rewarding. "They got to you, didn't they?" It was my colleague who had come into the classroom earlier. I nodded. "Don't worry," he said. "I taught many of them in the summer school. There are only 14 of them, and most won't graduate anyway. Don't waste your time with those kids." "What do you mean?" "They live in the shacks in the fields. They're migratory labour pickers' kids. They come to school only when they feel like it. The boy on the floor had pestered Mark's sister while they were picking beans together. I had to tell them to shut up at lunch today. Just keep them busy and quiet. If they cause you any trouble, send them to me." As I gathered my things to go home, I couldn't forget the look on Mark's face as he said, "We're retards." Retards. That word clattered in my brain. I knew I had to do something drastic. The next afternoon, I asked my colleague not to come into my class again. I needed to handle the kids in my own way. I returned to my room and made eye contact with each student. Then I went to the board and wrote ECINAJ. "That's my first name," I said. "Can you tell me what it is?" They told me my name was weird and that they had never seen it before. I went on the board and again, I wrote on the board and this time I wrote JANICE. Several of them blurted out the word, then gave me a funny look. "You're right, my name is Janice." I said, "I'm learning impaired, something called dyslexia. When I began school, I couldn't write my own name correctly. I couldn't spell words and numbers swam in my head. I was labelled retarded. That's right, I was a retard. I can still hear those awful voices and feel the shame. So, how'd you become a teacher? Someone asked. Because I hate labels and I'm not stupid and I love to learn. That's what this class is about. If you like the label retard, then you don't belong here. Change classes. There are no retarded people in this room. I'm not going to be easy on you, I continued. We're going to work and work until you catch up. You will graduate, and I hope some of you will go on to college. That's not a joke, it's a promise. I don't ever want to hear the word retard in this room again. Do you understand? They seemed to sit up a little straighter. We did work hard, and I soon caught a glimpse of promise. Mark especially was very bright. I heard him tell a boy in the hall, "This book's real good. We don't read baby books in there." He was holding a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. Months flew by, and the improvement was wonderful. Then one day Mark said, "But people still think we're stupid because we don't talk right." It was the moment I had been waiting for. Now we could begin an intensive study of grammar, because they wanted it. I was sorry to see the month of June approach. They wanted to learn so much. All my students knew I was getting married and moving out of the state. The students in my last period class were visibly agitated whenever I mentioned it. I was glad they had been fond of me, but what was wrong? Were they angry I was leaving the school? On my final day of classes, the principal greeted me as I entered the building. "Will you come with me, please?" he said sternly. "There's a problem in your room." He looked straight ahead as he led me down the hall. What now, I wondered. It was amazing. There were sprays of flowers in each corner, bouquets on the students' desks, and filling cabinets, and a huge blanket of flowers lying on my desk. How could they have done this, I wondered. Most of them were so poor that they relied on the school assistance program for warm clothing and decent meals. I started to cry and they joined me. Later I learned how they had pulled it off. Mark, who worked in the local flower shop on weekends, had seen orders from several of my other classes. He mentioned them to his classmates. Too proud to ever again wear an insulting label like poor, Mark had asked the florist for all the tired flowers in the shop. Then he called funeral parlours and explained that his class needed flowers for a teacher who was leaving. They agreed to give him bouquets saved after each funeral. That was not the only tribute they paid me, though. 2 years later, all of my 14 students graduated, and 6 earned college scholarships. 28 years later, I'm teaching in an academically strong school, not too far from where I began my career. I learned that Mark married his college sweetheart and is a successful businessman. And coincidentally, 3 years ago, Mark's son was in my sophomore honours English class. Sometimes I laugh when I recall the end of my day as a teacher. I think I considered quitting to do something rewarding. Oh, I can definitely identify with that. I was the artistic student that was definitely struggled a lot with reading and writing, and I find it amazing to think that I've written several books now and scientific papers, and it's incredible how far we can come, and sometimes our minds work differently. Our minds work differently, but it doesn't mean we're more or less intelligent. It's just different ways of using
Yeah.
our minds. So, well, I hope you enjoyed that story, and we're all far more amazing and talented than we realise, and there's so much to learn in life. Don't feel disconnected. Remember, we're all in it together. Take care, and see you for the next story. Take care.